What's the darkest secret anyone has ever told you? Serious. When I was 15, my cousin and I raided my dad's homebrew and got plastered. That night she confessed to me that her father, my dad's brother-in-law, was a secret cross-dresser. She'd come home early from a party and discovered him. Nothing to be ashamed of on his part, but he was staunchly conservative and a total pompous ass. Last person you'd expect. My dad and grandfather couldn't stand the bloke. I broke her confidence and ultimately told my dad. I was a kid and I didn't know what to do with the information. Dad of course didn't tell anyone, but he did say I'll only tell one person. Just the old man when he's on his deathbed so he can die with a smile on his face. My older sister admitted to me that when she was a teenager she went to the back streets, an area full of warehouses, with our dad's gun and thought about killing herself. My sister and I are 5 years apart. We didn't become close until I was about 13. She admitted this to me when I was about 14 or 15. I don't know if she remembers confiding in me about that detail, but I'm grateful she thought about her family members. I can't imagine growing up without her. My buddy killed 2 people trying to rob him with a rock in Brazil while on vacation. He came back with bad scratches and cuts, but he never told the authorities in fear that they'd arrest him or flip the story because he is a foreigner. That someone I knew ran someone over with the car a few years ago. He couldn't help it. It was raining and an elderly woman dressed dark suddenly stepped out between parked cars. He had no chance to react in time. The dark part being that when the police came to inspect the case, they told him not to worry, because they would take care that he didn't get into trouble, because the old lady was just a foreigner. They reported that his car was in perfect condition, his wipers brand new, anything to deflect any fault at all from him. I suppose it wasn't a secret. I just didn't know about it for a long time. My little sister was molested by our babysitter's husband when she was 4 and I was 6. She told me when we were in our mid-30s. It triggered a memory, walking around the house looking for her, and finally walking into the garage where she was there with him. He shouted at me to get out, which I did. I didn't see what was going on. She was being forced to give him a blowjob, or I didn't process it. It also triggered another memory, his older daughter, 12ish I think, undressing for the boys in the playhouse in the backyard. At the time I thought it was really weird, and now I know it was due to trauma. I tried to get my sister to do something about it, but she didn't want to, and the statute of limitations was long expired. Tried telling her that she maybe could save some other kid. Sis is dead now. Drank herself to death in her early 40s. I have droopy eyes and a learning disability due to head trauma I sustained as a child, but I never knew what happened. I was drinking with my older stepbrother and he broke down crying, telling me he's sorry for hitting me and causing all those issues. Apparently when he was 15 he decided to strike me in the head and I wasn't the same after. I can't tell you how much it hurts knowing this. I had a conversation with my mom after she downed a bottle of pills. She was out of it and was 100% honest. I was never planned for, wanted, or loved. I was an immediate regret. I knew this already, but it was nice to hear it out loud. I didn't call 911 or anything. Just let the cards fall where they may. My mom went right back to gaslighting me and doesn't remember the conversation. She's confused why I moved 300 miles away and only talk to her twice a year. My friend grew up with a horrifically abusive father. One time, her younger brother stole a candy bar, then got her older sister to take the fall for it. The dad bought a Costco pack of full-sized candy bars and forced the older sister to eat them until she vomited, then made her eat her vomit. I've heard it all working in children's mental health, but this story really bothers me. Please don't reply with similar stories because I can't take them. Didn't realize how dark that was back then, but a girl I went to school with, we were like 10, told me she wasn't allowed to see her dad anymore because he put gummy bears up her V. An elderly man confined to a wheelchair asked me to help him end his life. My boyfriend at the time admitted to him being bi and I said whoa, me too, made us a lot closer tbh. My friend came to school and told me something like this one day in 4th grade. Dude, I just ran into this old lady's mailbox in front of her house with my big ass bike on the way to school. She was sitting out front on her wheelchair, so I got the hell out of there. Anyways, she wheeled herself down to see the damage. lost control on the steep pavement to the road and got hit by a car. He said he had never biked so fast before. We are pretty sure she died. God may rest her soul. Was once told by my best friend that he had attempted suicide multiple times, and that he was gonna do it once and for all before our friend group started a group call and we joked and laughed for a couple hours. Then he put me on a private call and we talked about how he was mentally, but now he's better than he was. A couple of years back I was sitting at the bar watching a baseball game and having a pint. Just a handful of other people there, and me and this one guy at the bar were engaged in the typical sports conversation. After a couple of hours of the game this guy felt comfortable enough with me, or just needed to get it out, to tell me about his rape. I didn't really know what to do except just let him get it out. The "it's not your fault" platitude seems pretty hollow in the situation, but there wasn't much else I could muster. I asked if he was seeking help, and that there are many support groups for men that have been through similar situations. I offered the guy a hug and he damn near tackled me. I'm a pretty introverted person, so that level of trust from a stranger kind of freaks me out, but I hope I was at least able to help him somewhat, even if it was to just release some of the pressure for a little while. I had a coworker who used to confide in me. She got drunk one time and told me the reason behind her divorce. She found a VHS made with an old school video camera in which her daughter, 11 years old at the time, was sleeping in her underwear. The video was recorded secretly by her husband and hidden away with other disgusting masturbation material. Dude was perving on his own daughter. This all happened 10 years before I even met my coworker. Charges were never pressed and to this day she doesn't know where he is. We all knew that a friend of mine was from a troubled background, but none of us quite knew the full extent. She didn't speak to her dad or her older brother, and people thought she was a total brat because her dad would occasionally send her huge sums of money which she'd show zero appreciation for, and usually squander. She also had a quite clearly unhealthy relationship with sex which, when her classmates were young and stupid, led to her being labeled a slut, or easy. She had a fairly rough time in school by the sounds of it, but I only met her when we were about 22-23. She tried to kill herself one day after a bad breakup. I found her and took her to hospital. It turns out she has had horrific BPD most her life and been in and out of therapy and medication. It stemmed from a traumatic childhood where her older brother used to pimp her out to his friends when she was underage to settle drugs bets etc. She took a knife and tried to kill her brother one time, which led to the breakdown of her family. Her father and older brother cast her out of the family. Her mother took her in but resented her for it. It led to a trigger of abandonment, which explains why she took the breakup so badly, I suppose. I wish I didn't know this. My mum's friend was in a very abusive and manipulating relationship and her horrible husband made her have a sex with her special needs son because he will never experience a sex, no dark, really. But for some reason a lot of people have chosen me to be the first or among the first people they come out of the closet to. I think a lot of people wrongly presume I am homosexual as well and I guess that calms them down. One of my patients on ventilator, his family asked me to quietly end his life and they'd pay me for it. That as a kid her mother used to give her to guys for a night for money. He whored himself out to sleep on guys' couches and share their drugs, while he waited on his first few checks as a high school teacher. Straight, though, he insists, and has only dated women. My friends and I went to visit another friend's house. He was a 15-year-old boy being raised by an alcoholic, promiscuous, extremely messed up mother who was the talk of the town. As we got to the front door we could hear them arguing. He said something like, "How do you think I feel having a mother like you?" And she snapped back, "How do you think I feel knowing my own son's such a lousy duck?" We hightailed it out of there and never spoke of it again, until the day we were horsing around and I accidentally called him a methodica. When I was in first grade a classmate told me that her mom and dad had been fighting and her dad killed her pet bunny by throwing it off the balcony. He did it because he wanted to make my classmate cry because he knew it would hurt her mom. I don't know if it fits the category as it's more of a confession than secret, but my mom's co-worker told me she wanted to make me a man and bluntly sex talked at a party my mother hosted. She was 52 and I was 11 at the time, so I didn't really know what the hell she meant. Thankfully she didn't act on her desires that night and I told my mom everything the next day. I don't really know exactly what happened, but they are not acquainted, nor does she work at the same job as my mom anymore. My ex-friend told me that she wanted her little brother dead and would often do things like spit in his water bottle, hit him and call him stupid and locked him outside at 1 AM because he had trouble getting to sleep. He's 5. My sister started dating a really nice guy who had moved into our area. Super cute family and really friendly. About a year prior, a man in our town was arrested for multiple counts of child rape. He would invite boys to his house to hang out. He was absolutely disgusting and smiled in his mugshot photo. It shocked lots of people, as he was a very friendly man and lots of people knew his extended family. After about 2 weeks of dating, we found out through the boyfriend's family that my sister's boyfriend was one of the rapist's victims. It had been going on since he was 10 years old. He was 17 when we found out. My sister decided to break things off because she felt he needed space and recovery time before getting into a serious relationship. What freaks me out even more is 2 months before the man's arrest, he had invited my 12-year-old brother to come to his house. Luckily nothing happened, but to think how things could have turned out. I decided to kill my bully when I was 9. I put poison into a chocolate because I knew she'd steal my candy. It was a hot day and the chocolate melted before I could give it to her. Luckily, I never tried anything like that again. A friend told me that he had sex with his wife's 12-year-old sister. He said that he waited until she was almost a teenager as if that made it okay. I told him that was rape, not sex. It made me sick. I went home and never spoke to him again. I was driving a college buddy around the small New England town he grew up in. Driving down a dirt road and all of a sudden he freaks out. Turn the car around. We have to go. Now. Turn the car around now. So I turned the car around. He goes through some deep breathing and said my sister had a baby that died and she buried it there and never told my parents. I had forgotten about that until we drove by. A very good friend of mine decided to share with me that her and her group used to rob plenty of houses a night. They'd burst in at night while the owners were sleeping and she was the member of the group that was in charge of keeping them at knife point while the rest took their belongings. She told me that it was a hole she was sucked into and that her turning point was keeping a child at knife point. I'm glad she got out though. It was the most obvious case of a Sayawawa who you hang with that I've ever seen. A very close friend of mine had lost her fiancé in a horrible accident while they were in different cities and she never really got the peace she deserved. They had been together for nearly 6 years. So 2 years later, her and a bunch of our friends were drinking at a friend's place and she, drunk, of course, accidentally blurted out that she had tried to kill herself once. It came as an absolute shock to me because I was living with her since then and I hadn't noticed anything off. We never spoke about it after that, but I still wonder how she went through it alone and I feel guilty that I wasn't really there for her. One of my friends who wasn't exactly mentally stable told me about this entity that had been following him for the past few years. He said that he seemed friendly but was very overprotective to him. Here's the part where it gets weirder. He starts describing his visions. He described them like literally how you'd think hell was but worse than you could ever imagine. I asked him the name of said entity and he wouldn't tell me. I asked why and he said that everyone he's ever told had committed suicide within the day of hearing his name. I checked some local records and it's checked out. Haven't talked to him in a while. I hope he's doing alright. My youngest sister-in-law told me one night when we were both extremely inebriated that her dad had molested both her and her eldest sister for years. She made me promise to never tell my husband or their other sister. He's dead now so I don't think there's any point in bringing it up as it wouldn't do anything, only cause pain. We're all very close and get along really well. In fact, after their mother passed away we took her in because their dad was incapable of looking after her. Alcoholic. Mayo called home one day to find her unwashed and she hadn't eaten or gone to school in days. I'm only sorry we didn't act sooner. If only I had known. Mind you, she was 17 at the time but was obviously suffering from depression. Her sister has no idea that I know about them both and I've never brought it up again. Their other sister or my own has no idea that it was that bad for them. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that he had a favorite daughter that he didn't molest. It's also ducked up. It goes a long way to explain how she ended up making such a mess of her life though. Drugs, etc, and the other sister is so successful. I had an acquaintance admit to me that in a fit of jealous rage he broke several of his boyfriend's ribs because he caught him making out with someone else. That was the last time we talked. I never saw him again. I genuinely had no idea how to react at the time. And the contact came out of the blue as we hadn't spoken in months. Before anyone asks why I didn't call the cops, he hadn't told me where he was moving to when he left this town, and we hadn't been good enough friends to really connect, so we just stopped talking. So I couldn't just start calling the cops in random cities about a guy who might or might not be there, and if so I only had a name and an AIM handle for. Back when I was an anthro student in the field, I met a guy who was a world-no expert in something tangential to my research. After a few joints and many beers, our conversation turned from natural disaster of the region to a civil war 20ish years earlier. He spent a long while talking about what the other side did. Just about every combination of rape, incest, and necrophilia that the rebels forced on villagers who they thought were working with the government. From my own research prior to arriving, I had read similar things, so it wasn't that surprising, but Tuesday level of detail he went into shocked me. Even worse was when he said that if you talk to one of them they would say we did the same thing. And they wouldn't be wrong. I've been told by multiple women their abuse story. I'm a pretty non-judgmental person. I'm a guy, but when I'm friends with a woman it's not sexual even if I find them attractive. They aren't my friend for me to hit on, and for that reason so we bond, and a few have opened up to me. I try to be as supportive as I can and just listen. Most PPL just want someone to listen to them. Background. So she wasn't my blood relative, but she was family through marriage. I grew up calling her my cousin. Her older cousin married my uncle. Sorry if that sounds confusing. Anyways, my cousin told me that my uncle molested her once. I was speechless considering my uncle helped raise me and he never gave the vibe of being that person. At the time, she was living with her cousin and my uncle when this happened. Her cousin had to leave the country for a few days, so my cousin was left with my uncle and his children. She told me that my uncle tried to get her to go into his room and sleep there with him. I asked why would he do that while the kids were home. She said she doesn't know, but she said she refused. I can't remember the rest of the story, but I hid it for a while until one day it bothered me so much that I brought it up to the rest of my family. There was a lot of accusations going on about whether or not it actually happened. The thing is, my cousin is known to be a compulsive liar. In the past, she has said some crazy shit that makes me not want to believe anything she tells me. After the accusations, there was tension within the family, but I guess it was more of a forgive and forgot type of situation. Everyone is okay now. Families are weird. Probably too late, but I'm a psychologist specializing in complex trauma, so I hear ducked up it several times a day. The worst is a lady with HSAM. Remembers everything that happens to her, who spends one day every week recounting the horrific physical, sexual, and emotional abuse from approx age 1 till age 16 when she was able to GTFO. It's slow and painful, but she's finally telling her story. I simultaneously love and hate my job. That they have pedophiliac thoughts frequently. My online friend said he wants to abuse and beat this one bully girl to death. He said he won't do it, but yeah, it's ducked. A suicide plan. I convinced them to go to the hospital the very next day. My mom told me she didn't want to marry my dad. My mother told me, when I was around 24, that she had an abortion when she was a teenager. It was a surprising revelation because we were incredibly close and had spoken about the topic many times. But she never before told me this. The father was my now stepdad, her high school sweetheart. He's like a father to me, been in my life forever. Seriously the greatest dad I could imagine. But he never had a biological child of his own. So in that way, my mom's revelation struck me as especially sad. A guy I had been kinda seeing sat me down at a cafe and admitted to me that he beat his ex-girlfriend pretty regularly, and that once, he almost broke her nose. I was the only person he had ever told, at least according to him. I didn't really know what to do with the information. It felt like he was telling me this as kind of a warning against getting serious with him. But either regardless, I didn't pursue anything with him after that. My friend has a girlfriend but cheats on her all the time and just waits to pressure her into having sex and then leaving her. A friend of mine told me she attempted suicide with pills around the house but puked the pills up when she decided not to die. My mom has told my family friend, I was in the car, that my grandma was unhappy that it was a girl. My elder sister would be upset if she finds this. My mother told me several years ago about how she opened a letter addressed to my dad. She usually wouldn't open mail, but it was torn and addressed to Dearest Mike. This happened after I was born, but before my brother. I'm the fourth of 5. She told me this when my husband and I were thinking about splitting. As a secret, how she confronted my dad, his tears, her inability to leave as she had 4 kids and no income, how she chose to stay and work it out. It just rocked me to the core. Truthfully, as my mom got sick with permanent shingles and declining mental functions, my dad was devoted to her and devoted to caring for her. He passed just this March. Mom's Alzheimer's has progressed far enough that I doubt she remembers him cheating on her or telling me. She can barely remember that he died. I will carry this secret to my grave, though I really want to talk to my siblings and see if they knew too. Just exactly how many times I tried and failed to commit suicide, and only one person knows exactly how each time went down. Thankfully I'm doing better. Haven't had a thought like that in over a year. An ex-friend told me that he felt up an older very sick woman when he went to visit her in the hospital. He was a teenager then. One roommate ratted on another. I rented a room from a guy who was a quintessential poor little rich boy. He would do just about anything to get people to like him. I knew he was a bit of a social outcast from my friends who knew him before I rented from him. He flaunted his parents' wealth, scoffed at people, like me, who didn't have money to get the finer things. Ditch that old Toyota man. For me it's a Beamer or it's nothing. One night the other roommate came home a little buzzed and started dishing. You know most of the people he went to high school with won't talk to him, right? No one from that era wants anything to do with him. He used to invite the basketball team over to his house after every game. The last game of his senior year, he had them over and it was wild. His parents got them booze, let the whole team sleep over and they bounced out of town for the evening. His sister was 16 at the time and she was good looking. She asked to stay around for the party. Well, the team noticed she was hot, so he starts giving his sister booze to the point where passed out and he let the team run a train on her. So Dill uses his drunk sister as a means to buy what he hopes will be friendship and respect. Word got out and he became a pariah. Dating a girl. She had some issues with intimacy, like really weird about ways you couldn't touch her, etc. She had been molested for years by her youth pastor. No one believed her, so she was returned to it over and over again. Time for youth lock-in. Aren't you excited, dear? Catholics blow me away sometimes. When I was about 15 I was hanging out with a group of weed smokers but didn't smoke myself. So one day after partying one of the guys told me that he had tried to kill himself multiple times and showed me his forearms, which were so scared that the scares didn't exist. One of my friends told me he entered into the country illegally when he was 13. Where's the guy who dogged his mate by letting out he ducked his cousin to his mate's other cousins? I guess this belongs here. My best friend when we younger told me he'd been touched by and played house with a girl older than him when he was about 4. She was probably 8. I don't know the extent, but she showed him her genitals and would ask to see his. She'd kiss and touch him. They'd rub each other or just him. Not sure. The bigger secret though was he said he did the same thing to younger kids up until he turned 9 or 10 and realized how what he was doing was wrong. Not just that he'd get in trouble, but that he was doing something sick and unhealthy. He said he felt ashamed and stopped. We never talked about it after. He has never done anything that made me even remotely think he might be a predator or dangerous. We are both in our 30s now and he has kids and I believe they are totally safe. I just hope he has healed mentally. My dad has been an alcoholic since I could remember. He would drive me around drunk, but he was good at it, so he didn't think it was wrong. He said he drank because it was the only way for him to deal with his arthritis. He has had it extremely bad since he was a teenager. My mom never really drank and absolutely was against this. She even kept him from seeing me for quite some time. Looking back, I hated her for years over this. I forgive her now though. My dad can get pretty upset and even in tears when he gets drunk enough. There were many times he'd sit there and tell me how much he hates my mom. She was a whore, etc. Everything is her fault. Anyway, just last year, I'm 27 now, we were drinking some beers and playing darts for Fat Thursday and he ended up admitting that he fell deeply in love with a woman named Beth in high school. He told me about her and I asked a lot of questions. Turns out this was the love of his life and they were together for years. One Thanksgiving I believe he was supposed to go have dinner with her family. She was going to tell him she was pregnant with his child, but she got into a car accident. She lost the baby and she was brain dead. They had to let her go. That is why he drank all the time. He couldn't cope with it. He was numbing himself to get through life. Maybe it doesn't seem dark to others, but what rocky relationship we've had. That it took him 27 years to tell me, and the way he cried and broke over and over again while trying to get all of that out. It took me weeks to just absorb that and be able to reflect on it without feeling absolutely wrecked from the tragedy he experienced. My mom got really drunk one night and told me that my cousin's mom didn't kill herself. My grandma killed her because she caught her ducking my grandpa. They were fairly prominent in the area and it got swept under the rug as a suicide. My cousin still thinks his mom killed herself and now I can't be around him anymore because he idolizes my grandma because she took care of him after she killed his mom.